All right. Good evening, ladies and
Paul, you muted yourself again, and Katie is also here.
all right. Well, I'm so relieved that he and Derek are both here. But yeah, as you can see, I was ready to come up with an alternative topic. But let me introduce them and get things underway in the normal procedure. And so let me go to the share screen, and we should have Derek's picture coming up first. And hopefully I have him before you now. You can verify?
Yes, you do.
All right. Derek Sainsbury grew up in Taylorsville, Utah, and Sunbury, Australia. He received a BA in political science from the University of Utah, an MPA from Brigham Young University, and a PhD in American history from the University of Utah. And let me speak about that a little bit because I got a hold of his dissertation and was fascinated by the fact that he came up with over 300 people who had left Nauvoo as ambassadors, as campaigners for Joseph Smith, people who were carrying Book of Mormons to publicize the church, but they were carrying the campaign materials from Joseph Smith to advocate for him to be president of the United States. And then after he got his PhD, he published the Storming the Nation book, and that one has, I think, 611 people from the going out to campaign for him. And when I talked with him in John Whitmer, I think he said he's over 650 now. So the amount of research this man has done on pulling together an understanding of the Joseph Smith campaign of 1844 is, I think, unprecedented and phenomenal. And so we are remarkably fortunate to have him with us this evening. He has published several articles on Joseph Smith's campaign and on religious liberty. And with the fact that he's identified more than 600 campaigners for Joseph Smith, then I think he'd probably tell us by name, but that's a lot more names than most of us are going to be interested in grabbing anyway. Our second speaker is Katie Dunn. She's a student at Brigham Young University. I think she may be finished there now because this was a statement that I pulled up from a little earlier in the year. But she's studying environmental science and sustainability with minors in logic and philosophy. She's planning to go to law school, and she's a lab manager for a watershed ecology lab and a research assistant for a professor in the church history department. So these positions, she says, have strengthened my leadership and collaborative skills, as well as my ability to read legal and historical documents. Major and minors have increased my ability to comprehend complex topics and communicate with others succinctly. Her John Whitmer presentation brings her here tonight to share her parallels, or share the parallels that she found between two candidates for president of the United States. So I'll leave that for them to get into, but let us pray together. Generous God who creates enough for every creature, whose nature is to promote life and love and give them nurture. We bow in supplication for your mercy, for we see the lack of our own generosity contributing to disparities that leave 1 billion people short of food. And we revisit some of our history this evening to examine political choices that put us where we are, with many hungry, most struggling, and a few doing really good. Your world is beautiful, self-sustaining, with dimensions that invite us to eternal life. Our world, the one we have made, is full of war, conflict, inequity, and strife. And yet we hear your prophets, see the history, recognize that simply by following your plan for us, we could live in peace. And yet we are slow to learn that language, slow to care for each other, slow to make political choices that would make our conflicts cease. This evening, as we contemplate the consequences of assassinations of two leaders running for the presidency of the United States, we look to you for guidance that your ways, not ours, will ultimately seal our fates. Bless our presenters, Brother Sainbury and Sister Dunn, and the participants to be able to see beyond our welfare to the well-being of every creature as we embrace our stewardship of the marvelous blessing of life that we are called to nurture. In the name of the Prince of Peace we pray. Amen. All right. Welcome, Derek. I presume that the two of you will want to present and then take questions. But if you'd like to allow people to interrupt and give their questions and comments as you go, then that's your choice. But yeah, that's your choice.
Thanks. Can you hear me? Does everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. Paul, thanks for inviting us to be here. And it's good to see all of you. I was here a few years ago and had the great opportunity of being with you. Apologize for being late. That's my fault. I was clicking on the wrong link. So, but found it and here we are.
We're glad we
So
found you.
I'm able to share my screen, right?
Please.
Okay. Let me get the right one. And we should be seeing a picture of Joseph and Bobby. Is it working? We're good? Okay, awesome. All right, I will start and then I will be doing the Joseph Smith side of this, and then Katie will do the side for Robert Kennedy. So let's hold off on questions till the end, and we're happy to stay and answer as many questions as you'd like. Okay, here we go. Joseph Smith Jr. and Robert F. Kennedy Sr., the nation's only assassinated presidential candidates, shared a fierce commitment to tackling economic and racial injustice. Driven by their religious convictions and by their experiences with flawed policies, they boldly championed change. Tonight, Katie and I will share their innovative anti-poverty initiatives, Smith's visionary Nauvoo, and Kennedy's transformative Bedford-Stuyvesant. We will explore their roots and their comparative successes and failures to each other and to contemporary government efforts. Smith's and Kennedy's audacious visions for a more equitable nation defined their legacies, but also made them targets of hate and, tragically, helped seal their fate. Joseph Smith reached adulthood during the cosmos crumbling, a turbulent era shaped by the American and Industrial Revolutions and the Second Great Awakening. These upheavals brought new social, economic, political, and religious opportunities, but also deep divisions. Americans settled frontier towns, entered partisan politics, embraced diverse faiths, and shifted from subsistence farming to manufacturing and trading in an ever-widening market. All of this sparked political strife, economic instability, and religious discord. Smith's family mirrored the chaos. His once prosperous parents experienced economic ruin and religious division. Similarly, only 100 miles away, young Nancy Alexander lost her father to death and the family farm to swindlers. Raised by relatives of conflicting denominations, she also sought religious and economic certainty. Joseph Smith's quest for religious truth ignited visions, new scripture in the Book of Mormon, and a revelatory church, the very one Nancy joined with her husband, Moses Tracy. Smith's Book of Mormon and other revelations envisioned a Zion society of social harmony, political unity, spiritual purity, and economic equality. Like the Shakers and Harmonists, modern Zion aimed to heal a fractured world, restoring the early Christian ideal of having all things in common, also found in 4th Nephi, wherein, quote, they had all things in common among them. Therefore, there were not rich and poor, bond and free, but they were all made free and partakers of the heavenly gift. 4th Nephi 1:3. Converts flocked to Jackson County, Missouri to build Zion and to Kirtland, Ohio as a stake of Zion. These cities' plans, centered on temples of spiritual and secular learning, were encircled by family lots with farms on the outskirts. Zion would restore the gentleman or yeoman farmer ideal of Thomas Jefferson and Smith's grandparents. It would restore order to the cosmos. The revealed law of consecration and stewardship would meet Zion's economic needs and ensure equality. Members consecrated their property to the church bishop, who granted an inheritance as a stewardship. Annual stewardship surpluses would fund church operations, alleviate poverty, and transform Jacksonian America's cutthroat economy into one of equality, shared prosperity, and self-sufficiency. With effort, they could replicate Nephi's society in Alma chapter 1. Quote, "And thus, in their prosperous circumstances, they did not send any away who were naked, or that were hungry, or that were athirst, or that were sick, or that had not been nourished. And they did not set their hearts upon riches. Therefore, they were liberal to all, both young and old, both bond and free, both male and female, whether out of the church or in the church, having no respect to persons as to those who stood in need." End quote. Yet the system of consecration and stewardship quickly collapsed, in part because, unlike the Nephites, they did not begin with prosperity. Most converts were poor, and many wealthy members withheld support, creating crippling debts. Furthermore, persecution literally gutted Zion of her Jackson County lands, homes, and stores. Despite the collapse of formal consecration, Kirtland continued to buzz with converts and construction. Before moving on to Missouri, Moses and Nancy Tracy demonstrated their belief in consecration by lending Joseph Smith $50 to ease church debts. Hard currency like that was hard to come by in frontier towns like Kirtland. To solve the problem, whoops, went too far there. There we go. To solve the problem, church leaders launched the Kirtland Bank and urged saints to buy shares with their scarce cash. However, the bank collapsed from undercapitalization, the global financial panic, and sabotage, creating massive debts and eroding trust in Smith and Zion. When Smith and the Kirtland Saints fled to far west Missouri, they found a thriving town with hundreds of homes, dozens of shops, and vast farms. This included the Tracy's home and 40-acre farm. A revelation refined the law of consecration, requiring saints to initially donate all surplus property and then tithe yearly. However, before the first tithe, the extermination order extinguished Smith's third Zion. The saints lost everything. The Tracy's losses totaled $500. Like Lehi and his family at the beginning of the Book of Mormon, the Latter-day Saints fled murderous persecution, leaving behind their homes, lands, and precious things. Refugees in a new promised land, Smith and the impoverished saints resurrected Zion by building the city of Nauvoo. Learning from past failures, Smith delayed formal consecration indefinitely while retaining its underlying principles of stewardship and cooperation. A robust city charter empowered his four-pronged anti-poverty strategy: affordable land and housing, jobs for the poor, universal education, and localized control. With no capital, Nauvoo's economy centered on agriculture, land sales, building construction, and public works, all financed by large tracts of land Smith purchased on credit to resell to members. Missouri saints like the Tracys legally exchanged their losses for $50 lots. Converts with means paid for their parcels. The destitute and widows received theirs free, and immigrants often secured theirs on credit. The Nauvoo House, a joint stock hotel venture, required fully paid shares to avoid repeating the Kirtland Bank disaster. Yet heavy land debt required more converts purchasing land to both support Zion's dream and pay for her mounting obligations. Chiefly farmers and tradesmen, Nauvoo settlers thrived under these policies, securing city lots and nearby farmland. Unlike most frontier towns where land wealth remained concentrated among a small elite, nearly half of Nauvoo's non-immigrant men owned farms. Employment opportunities also expanded for most. Moses Tracy shifted from farming to raising cattle and finally to managing a store. The Tracys sold their log home, built a frame house, sold it, and built a larger frame house next to the rising temple. English converts, who soon became 30% of the population, arrived as destitute manufacturers. Smith employed them in public works, like the temple and Nauvoo House, reflecting his revelations that laboring with one's own hands brought dignity, not indolent handouts. The church paid these men in food and other essentials from the tithing storehouses. Despite Illinois' restrictive black codes, free blacks like landowner and carpenter Elijah Abel and domestic helper Jane Manning James found greater acceptance and opportunities in Nauvoo. Smith championed universal education as essential for Zion's spiritual and secular success. He understood the Book of Mormon's warning in 3rd Nephi that society became divided when prosperity and chances for learning are limited to the wealthy. 3rd Nephi 6:12. The Nauvoo Charter included the University of Nauvoo, offering tax-supported elementary, secondary, and university schooling, a breadth of education unsurpassed in the Midwest. While Illinois educated just 1 in 6 children, Nauvoo schooled virtually all. Progressively, half were girls. Nancy Tracy taught school in her home, also boosting their family income. Adults attended university courses and lectures, again with strong female involvement. The system's leaders set high teaching standards, but local wardens oversaw the schools. In fact, Joseph Smith championed local control. He created municipal wards, each led by a bishop who ensured everyone had housing, food, and employment. Exercising more autonomy than under prior consecration systems, Nauvoo bishops worked tirelessly and innovatively to make Zion function. Members like Moses Tracy did their part. While living in the 5th Ward, he paid tithing in cash, cattle, and labor. Joseph and Emma Smith founded the Nauvoo Female Relief Society to further assist immigrants, the poor, and the sick. Nancy Tracy was an early and active member. The Relief Society and the bishops collaborated, streamlining aid citywide. Unlike contemporary poverty relief in the form of sporadic religious handouts or the emerging prison-like county poorhouses, Smith's localized system fostered community, reduced poverty, and drove economic growth. Despite limited capital and heavy debt, Nauvoo thrived, impressing observers with her vibrant business, remarkable growth, and relative equality in a time of deep economic depression, particularly in Illinois. In 1844, Joseph Smith ran for president to champion religious liberty and to reform the nation, including advocating economic equality. He called for abolishing slavery through compensation and ensuring that free slaves be hired to, quote, labor like any other human being, end quote. Smith proposed a national bank with locally run branches supplying capital to cash-poor frontier towns like Nauvoo. He favored transforming prisons into seminaries of learning and having prisoners labor on public works. Smith sought prosperity for all, regardless of, quote, color or condition, end quote, urging economic growth and lower taxes to foster, quote, more equality across cities, towns, and the country, and more honest and familiar communities, end quote. Of the over 650 electioneer missionaries who canvassed the nation advocating these ideas, only one was female, Nancy Tracy. Moses went too. Nauvoo's success fueled opposition from neighbors wary of its political and economic power, while internal dissent, including against Joseph's economic leadership, intensified. He was imprisoned and then murdered on June 27, 1844, becoming the young republic's first assassinated presidential candidate. Brigham Young continued Smith's economic vision in Nauvoo, and he later replicated Smith's Nauvoo in hundreds of towns in the Great Basin. The Tracys settled in Marriott, Utah. When the railroad brought external economies, Young countered with local economic cooperatives and ward relief societies, a combination which thrived until anti-polygamy laws financially destroyed the church. Nancy Tracy led the Marriott Ward's efforts and was its largest financial contributor. Decades later, during the Great Depression and the government's New Deal response, the Latter-day Saint welfare system, built on tithing, stewardship, education, food reserves, and jobs, flourished, eventually enabling today's multi-billion-dollar global humanitarian and education effort. Quite a legacy indeed, Lieutenant General Joseph Smith. So what about Robert Kennedy?
Robert F. Kennedy's assassination occurred at a time of deep division. Riots during the last few summers had scarred inner cities like Harlem and Detroit and reflected this social unrest. In early 1968, the National Advisory Commission on Civil Disorders published a report investigating the cause of these riots. The summary states, "This is our basic conclusion. Our nation is moving towards two societies, one black, one white, separate and unequal. Discrimination and segregation have long permeated much of American life. They now threaten the future of every American." This report also addressed the existence of Black ghettos, inner city areas with high rates of poverty, violence, and racial discrimination. The commission further states, quote, "What white Americans have never fully understood, but what the Black can never forget, is that white society is deeply implicated in the ghetto. White institutions created it, white institutions maintain it, and white society condones it," close quote. The assertions in this report juxtaposed the white scripts of its time and left Americans divided moving forward. Years previous, the late President John F. Kennedy introduced a new philosophy to address these sorts of problems. His philosophy, coined the New Frontier, rejected the existing solutions for complex issues such as war and poverty. Instead, his philosophy demanded that Americans voyage past this new frontier of progress to achieve deeper understanding where, quote, "the unsolved problems of peace and war, the unconquered pockets of ignorance and prejudice, and the unanswered questions of poverty and surplus lay," close quote. This philosophy can be seen in the creation of the Peace Corps and other executive actions he took. Cut short by his 1963 assassination, President Kennedy's new frontier was never thoroughly explored, and his successor, President Johnson, reverted to a more traditional approach. President Johnson's famous War on Poverty was a flood of legislation that created a safety net for the poor through programs like Head Start and food stamps. These programs aimed to lift the poor to a new acceptable base level, but they did not target the root causes of poverty. President Johnson also took a law and order approach to crime, focused on increasing law enforcement for high crime areas like Black ghettos. These policies contributed to heightened tension between northern Black communities and law enforcement. In the wake of President Johnson's unconditional war on poverty and his law and order approach, American society grappled with severe divisions. Poverty rates for Black Americans were 3.5 times higher than for white Americans. Average education levels likewise showed these stark racial differences. Even political traditions began to fracture. The South, which was historically Democratic, resisted desegregation efforts, and the war in Vietnam proved divisive for the Democratic Party, where both strong support and strong opposition lived. Robert F. Kennedy was familiar with these issues. During his brother's presidency, he served as Attorney General. Similar to President Johnson later, Robert Kennedy took a law and order approach to attacking crime, but he focused on organized crime like mobs, and Johnson focused more on civil unrest in inner cities. From 1965 to his death in 1968, Robert Kennedy served as a United States Senator to New York. In this position, he traveled across America and saw this injustice firsthand on Native American reserves and on migrant farms, in remote Appalachian towns and shacks along the Mississippi Delta and inside northern ghettos. This experience changed him. His speeches showed more compassion, addressing the racial and economic problems he saw, and he expressed ideas similar to his brother's New Frontier from years ago. He once stated, "My brother barely had a chance to get started, and there is so much now to be done for the Negroes and the unemployed and the school kids and everybody else who is not getting a decent break in our society. This is what counts." Certainly, Senator Kennedy's goal was not to revert back to the circumstances of 1963. Racial inequality and poverty then were much worse than they were in 1968. However, President Kennedy's New Frontier promised a trajectory much better suited to help the hungry, the unemployed, the disenfranchised, and the forgotten than the trajectory established by President Johnson. For example, a former leader once claimed that the riots in Watson and Harlem could be resolved with just greater respect for the law, similar to the rhetoric of President Johnson. Senator Kennedy, however, refuted that, quote, "There is no point in telling Negroes to obey the law," close quote. He continued, "To many Negroes, the law is the enemy. In Harlem and Bedford-Stuyvesant, it has almost always been used against them." Instead, Senator Kennedy proposed that a new law would effectively address these problems, and that this new law would yield to other kinds of fundamental change, like better education and better housing and better job opportunities, but only when the people in the ghetto acquire and wisely exercise political power in the community, only when they establish meaningful connection with the society from which they have been excluded. Our research focuses on understanding this new law, how Senator Kennedy brought it to life, and how it can inform our social progress today. The social issues that I will address are mainly poverty and racial inequality, though you could apply this sort of findings to a much broader context. As I tell the story of an oft-overlooked neighborhood in Brooklyn and how Senator Kennedy's new law rooted and took life, consider how his granting more political power, fostering inclusion, and establishing meaningful connection to a society struggling to survive are a definitive split from the policies of his time. This is Bedford-Stuyvesant. It's a 5-square-mile area in Brooklyn with around 400,000 residents and serious problems of unemployment and underemployment and inadequate housing. Bedford-Stuyvesant, better known as Bed-Stuy, faced systematic problems, mainly from a resident's lack of education and training, and in turn, a lack of job availability in the area and nearby. These circumstances had a, quote, depressing effect on Bed-Stuy's economy. As one aide to Senator Kennedy put it, he said Bedford-Stuyvesant was a wreck. In early 1966, Senator Kennedy and his aides toured the area, walking down St. Mark's Avenue and past the home of a certain Wendell Rice. Rice had moved to the area a few years ago, looking for a better place to live. In 1966, he was still renting out a single room because the housing market was so difficult. After touring the neighborhood in early 1966, Senator Kennedy and his aides created a plan to address the roots of the problem they saw, distinctly different from President Johnson's welfare plan and more attuned to the New Frontier approach. Kennedy's vision was to permanently pull Bedford-Stuyvesant out of poverty, forever changing its trajectory through community-based action, through local control. His program, which was really a collection of smaller programs run by 2 sister committees, took on this task. both to physically reconstruct Bedford-Stuyvesant, but also to pull it out of poverty. To put this in Book of Mormon terms, he wanted the residents of Bed-Stuy to prosper in the land, and at this time they really weren't prospering. Senator Kennedy's team formed two committees. One committee was mainly Bedford-Stuyvesant residents, such as parents, business owners, and activists, and focused on addressing local issues, facilitating neighborhood participation, and building leadership. This committee was known as Restoration Corporation, or simply Restoration. A second committee, the Bedford-Stuyvesant Development and Services Corporation, was composed of all-white, high-profile politicians, investors, businessmen, and lawyers, and was created to share the knowledge and skills to assist restoration in accomplishing their plans. Wendell Rice, the one living on St. Mark's Avenue, quit his job with the New York Highway Department to be a community organizer for restoration. He spent a whole summer conducting surveys with residents to understand what issues mattered the most to them. The result of his team's surveys informed a large part of restoration's work. Today, I will focus on their programs for housing, reconstruction, employment, local control, and private investment. First, housing. Restoration planned to help people purchase homes rather than rent them. This would increase local control because people who live where they own property are much more invested in improving that community. Additionally, restoration created a program to restore homes. As you can see in this picture, and you can see it a lot more when you look online, a lot of the brownstones in Bedford-Stuyvesant were dangerously deteriorated. This program would train local workers to fix these homes while paying them and giving them long-term skills. With such high home deterioration rates, this program also aimed to increase the livability and desirability of Bed-Stuy. Kennedy also proposed opening a 4-year college in the neighborhood, a college that had accommodations for working students, like giving them credit for related job experiences so they could work and be in school, and with programs particularly focused on technical training. This sort of accessibility would be monumental for giving residents higher rates of employability, especially since an unusually high percentage of Bed-Stuy residents were unskilled laborers and therefore especially vulnerable to factory automation. Development and Services, the more elitist group, worked with restoration to increase the investability of Bed-Stuy. As Kennedy promised, the program, quote, "The program for the development of Bedford-Stuyvesant will combine the best of community action with the best of the private enterprise system. Neither by itself is enough, but in their combination lies our hope for the future," close quote. Specifically, they crafted legislation that leveraged tax cuts as a way to attract private firms to invest in and employ residents of Bedford-Stuyvesant. This was a unique aspect of Senator Kennedy's plan, and one that juxtaposed the welfare policies of his time. Restoration Corporation also created a business loan program to, quote, "stimulate minority entrepreneurship and create employment," close quote. These programs weren't meant to be a band-aid for poverty, but to be a permanent break in the cycle of poverty. Restoration Corporation also established an ambitious manpower program aimed at training workers and placing them in jobs. They had a goal of 600 job placements a year. While many job trainings at this time had been attempted before, Restoration Corporation planned to work especially hard to ensure that the jobs they trained people for would actually exist when they were ready, rather than training for hypothetical but never materializing jobs. This manpower program also provided a way for workers showing leadership potential to take leadership courses or otherwise advance up the business hierarchy. This program was a direct attempt to loop Bed-Stuy residents into the greater economy, connecting them to a society from which they had been excluded. Similarly, I think you're on the wrong slide, Derek. Just one more. Yeah.
Oh, one more.
Yeah.
There we go.
There you go. Similarly, neighborhood block associations were formed to identify public service problems and develop solutions. Each block had the power to address the issues closest to home. This sort of local control, in conjunction with the other programs, countered the lack of cohesion and unity that Bedford-Stuyvesant faced and gave residents a voice. These block associations were the first of their kind and a cornerstone of Kennedy's plan, something that he really was proud of. All of these programs attacked a different root cause of poverty, but collectively, they boasted a comprehensive, first-of-its-kind experiment to extend prosperity to Bed-Stuy residents. But what happened to Bedford-Stuyvesant? Well, put bluntly, as the 1972 government report wrote, the program has had a visible but limited impact on Bedford-Stuyvesant. We will explore what that means because it's a little vague by looking through the impacts of this program outlined above. It's also important to mention that although Kennedy's death in 1968 left his greater political movement without a leader, the president of Bedford-Stuyvesant Restoration Corporation, Franklin Thomas, primarily led before and after Senator Kennedy's death and continued leading for many years. Arguably, the most visible effort of this experiment was the home restoration. Through the late 60s and 70s, the Bedford-Stuyvesant Restoration Corporation repaired more than 4,000 buildings. Today, this neighborhood is renowned for its beautiful brownstones. In 1970, Medgar Evers College was founded, a four-year college that sits just outside of Bed-Stuy. This college now serves over 4,000 students per year and has a variety of non-traditional programs for career advancement. Its founding occurred largely through the work of Bed-Stuy residents and other community organizers, showing an increase in bargaining power that they acquired. As for employment, there had been less success. Sponsors originally set a goal of 3,750 new jobs. By 1971, they had made almost enough job placements to meet this, but many were temporary. The next year was not so successful. Around half of their aspired job placements were made. Due to these overly optimistic goals, which are partly blamed on an economic downturn and an increasingly high cost of labor, this nonprofit and their sponsors shifted their sights from creating jobs to stimulating business ownership and increasing services to residents. So this shift did reduce efforts to create jobs. However, the tech company IBM located a plant to manufacture and recondition computer cable parts, and 80% of its employees lived in Bedford-Stuyvesant. So that's a pretty definite one. That's about 300 people. Rice's own life shows the contour of Senator Kennedy's work in Bed-Stuy. He moved to Bed-Stuy as a young adult with little money, a dead-end job, and nowhere to live. He eventually found somewhere to rent, quit his job, and became a community organizer, conducting surveys and resolving conflicts of interest between neighborhood factions. He married, started a family, and received both a bachelor's degree and a master's degree while working full-time for restoration, which was made possible through a program similar to the one Kennedy proposed, where he could work for credit. Rice eventually became Restoration's program director and led their weatherization program. Like he dreamed of decades ago, Rice now owns a home in Bed-Stuy. His kids are educated and well-employed. Restoration helped him break the cycle of poverty in his family. His life is now prosperous. Today, Restoration Corporation lives on, working on the same programs as before, like home ownership, business investment, and employment. Many smaller development corporations and neighborhood blocks have sprung up as well, within the neighborhood and elsewhere in the United States, following the example of Restoration on a smaller scale. These groups reflect Senator Kennedy's desire to capture the energy of local residents and create a sense of community. The Bedford-Stuyvesant Restoration Corporation was not a silver bullet that fixed every problem this neighborhood faced. Programs aimed to increase employment faltered, and current residents still face current problems like high prices of living because now there's a lot of tourism in the area. But it revived a sense of community and empowered residents in a way they had never experienced. Senator Kennedy's pioneering and willingness to break free from the welfare politics of his time also ensured his plan didn't fall victim to the same problems contemporary solutions faced. His efforts teach us that reverting back to the circumstances of the past may not offer the best solution for complicated problems, but that the past may offer frameworks and ideas such as Senator Kennedy's New Frontier, which are better suited than our present-day philosophies. We must be willing to understand the issues that we understand now through a variety of lenses, including those from the past, to find the best way forward. Throughout the Book of Mormon, we see communities torn apart and built again. Nauvoo and Bedford-Stuyvesant, which started as fractured societies, were rebuilt by their visionary leaders seeking prosperity. This quest is not new. We've seen it over and over again in history. and neither were the philosophies of these leaders, Smith and Kennedy. Our society today grapples with complex issues such as political tribalism, climate change, immigration, and healthcare, and the list goes on and on. We are far from universally prosperous. Smith and Kennedy's bold, community-driven approaches, which were rooted in empowerment, equity, cooperation, particularly between the private and public spheres, offer critical insights. Their focus on employment, housing, education, and local community control could be the roadmap for community leaders, politicians, and policymakers. While assassinations silenced Smith's and Kennedy's voices, we can amplify their calls for justice to confront current crises with innovative, inclusive, and community-focused solutions. Joseph Smith and Robert F. Kennedy dared to reimagine community. Though their experiments were interrupted by violence, they challenge us to strengthen communities, merge idealism with pragmatism, and commit to long-term change. To move forward, maybe we need to look backward. Maybe it's time for a new restoration. Thank you.
Wow. As the host, it's my privilege to get to ask the first question. And one or maybe both of you have indicated that these men were both motivated religiously. I read in the book of Alma that people should be governed by their own voices, and that therefore provides a religious background for Joseph Smith. But Bobby Kennedy was Catholic. What out of his Catholic background do you see as stimulating his interest in reaching out to the marginalized?
Yeah, so Bobby was pretty religious. He was the most religious, it seems, of his family. And especially after his brother's death, he grew increasingly more religious. He saw a lot of solace through his faith. And I think that his suffering that he experienced through his brother's assassination through a religious lens drew him to a new sense of vulnerability and openness, which helped him relate to the poor and helped him relate to these sort of causes that he later championed. And so his religiosity before was fine, but it was never as personal as it was after his brother's death. And so he isn't extremely religious in his speech, but he talks a lot about suffering and about understanding these people, and that you can see a lot of that through the sort of theology that he has, and through the sort of like spirituality that he now has, his connectedness with other people.
Thank you. Let me thank both of you for a beautiful presentation, and let's open it up for people to raise their questions and comments. And I see James Lucas has a hand up. Deb is on hand to moderate the line. So if you don't find your way to the reaction page, wave your hands and let her keep you in the queue so that everybody can have access. Mr. Lucas.
Just 1 second. Let's see. Here we go. Okay. Okay. Very interesting presentation. Thank you both. I missed the very beginning. So did you do this as a book, or was this a paper presented at the Whitmer Association? Just what was the source of your collaboration and this particular project, or is it part of a bigger project?
It's actually part of a bigger project. I'm researching and writing a dual biography of Joseph Smith and Robert Kennedy as the only two assassinated presidential candidates. And Katie has been working with me for a couple years, and her with this project, and her I kind of asked her what she wanted to work on, what kind of things she wanted to concentrate on with Robert Kennedy, and it was this idea of economic equality, racial addressing racial inequality and things like that. And so we started searching our sources to see if we could come up with some kind of comparison. And we just thought that the comparison with Nauvoo and Bedford-Stuyvesant just kind of popped out. And so we created this for the Mormon Historical Association presentation, and then we've since submitted it. We've submitted it to a journal to have printed. We haven't heard back yet from the peer review and stuff like that. So that's its origin. And I'll say that Katie did a ton of research. I brought back, thousands of pages of the Kennedy campaign papers, and she went through those. She went through several biographies. She went and watched a film in California while she was on vacation. That was a documentary of that. And as part of my wider project, I have several other research assistants who are taking all of those campaign papers of Robert Kennedy and tracking people down who are still alive who worked in that campaign. And the person that she was mentioning, that was the aide that she mentioned twice, that was the aide to Senator Kennedy, was actually one of his junior staff members that I passed him on to her, and she interviewed him about Bedford-Stuyvesant. So it's been a really fun project for the two of us. And again, it's just part of this bigger project that I've been working on.
Oh, okay. So you actually hope to have a paper come soon that
Yes.
summarizes what you presented here, but then also down the road, there'll be something more elaborate that you're also working on. Okay.
Correct. Correct.
Okay. So so let me ask like a really detailed question, which is on the Mormon side, you picked out as kind of a on the ground, everyman example, Moses and Nancy Alexander Tracy.
Correct.
I was just wondering, was there a particular reason for picking them? And what were your sources? Because just to full disclosure here, I'm a descendant of Nancy and Moses.
Awesome.
And I was, and I have family members who've been very diligent about doing a family history. And I was not aware of there necessarily being a journal or anything in the family history that would recount to all of this. I mean, I'm not. I think your facts are all accurate. I'm just wondering, one, why you picked them in particular to kind of highlight as a typical example of the early Mormons and their encounters with Joseph's planning, and secondly, if you had a journal or a firsthand source, or if this was all based on secondary sources.
Great question. When I wrote my dissertation and turned that into a book, in my discovery of all these different missionaries, I discovered that Nancy Tracy was the only female that went out on the campaign mission.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've actually done a lot of scholarship on her. I did an article on religious liberty, the denial of religious liberty to Latter-day Saints throughout the 1800s, and I used her as the centerpiece for that. That's a book chapter in a wider book on religious freedom. She played a big role in my last chapter of the book itself, the Storming the Nation book. And I just love her to death. So I'm very proud of your great grandparents, and particularly of her. And I would suggest that you particularly read that article, the article I did on that centerpiece is her, because she has three actual different histories that she wrote. One in 1880, one in 1885, and one in 1895-96. And that's the primary source material that I pull a lot of things from. But I also looked at tithing receipts for Moses in the Nauvoo time period, and some other primary source material that's available in the Joseph Smith papers. So yeah, I'm pulling from sources that are primary, written by her or contemporary to the time.
Okay, are those journals in the church archives or are they available
Yet
online?
they're both in the church archives, but also they're pretty available online. If you have, I have them all as PDFs, and if you wanted to email me, I'd be more than happy to send those to you.
Okay, and where do you work? Are you
I'm
at
at
BYU?
BYU.
Okay, so I could just send you a request to your BYU email address.
Correct. Yep.
Okay.
And I could send
Just
you I could send you a link to the I mean it's not officially free yet, but I'll make it free to you of the book
okay.
chapter. Since you're family, right? It has to be free to you since it's your family. Okay, I
Thank
can
you.
send you a PDF version of that article or book chapter that I wrote a few years ago.
All right. Well, I'll share just a couple pieces of trivia, and then we'll pass on to the next questioner. But first, where did she go on her mission on this process? The
They
political
went to New
mission.
York. They went back to their hometown areas in New York.
Okay, that was in upstate New
So
York.
yeah, so she took
They're old New
both. It
Englanders.
was Moses who was called initially, and she convinced him to go ask Joseph and Hiram if she could go as well, and they said yes, and that she would be a great uh, help to Moses, and so they actually took all four of their kids as well.
Okay. Now, this is two quick trivial points that I can share with you that you might not have uncovered and might not be critical, but the Alexanders were actually old Vermonters, so they kind of shared the Smiths family kind of background. But uh, the uh, uh, the earliest Alexander, this probably would have been Moses's grandfather or something like that, or Nancy's grandfather. I can't remember how the lines actually go. Was a Green Mountain Boy, and they
Yes.
were in the very early kind of that revolutionary New England tradition. And the other thing is that um, she had one of her granddaughters, my grandmother, actually was one of the first sister missionaries, and she served her mission in Brooklyn near the
Hmm.
Bedford Stuyvesant's
Oh wow,
neighborhood at the time when the church mission Eastern States Mission headquarters was located there.
wow.
So anyway,
Yeah, I didn't know the second one. On the first
yeah.
one, I actually mentioned that in that book chapter about
Oh,
her and Moses's revolutionary ancestry.
oh, okay. Okay, very good, very good. All right, I have some other questions, but I'll pass the talking stick for now because I could probably just, take a couple hours talking with you about all this.
Well,
So
let me highlight this is an extraordinarily delightful connection that's coming across here on the forum. So thank you, James, for highlighting that you got a connection to those campaigners, including the one woman. That's just awesome. Well, I'm delighted for you. All right, let's get it on to the other people. Deb, who's next?
Okay, Shane, go ahead, please.
Yes, if Joseph Smith were to run, if Joseph Smith were to run for president today with the same platform, do you think he'd be labeled as a socialist for some of the planks on his platform, like having a national bank, for example?
Well, I mean, I guess it would be how you interpret it. The national bank that he proposed is probably more similar to the Federal Reserve, but instead of being in private hands, the idea that he gave was that it would be the people that would run it would be locally elected. So nationally elected for the national bank, but in each of the states, there would be, you would run for controller of the bank just like you would run for mayor or for governor or for president of the United States. So it was closer to the people than the Federal Reserve idea was, but more, it was trying to bring back the second national bank that Andrew Jackson killed, but put it in the hands of non-elites, if you will, so that it had, from his point of view, meaning Joseph's point of view, more accountability to policies that would benefit not the rich, but all citizens. As far as his other ideas, obviously slavery, that's kind of in the past now. His idea about reducing Congress in half and reducing their pay. I don't know. I think all parties would, congratulate that idea. I don't know that. I think that would be pretty widely heralded. The idea of the executive government, or the president having power to enforce the Constitution within the states. The 14th Amendment has already taken care of that. Prison reform would probably get him branded as very left-leaning. His prison reform included basically allowing for the eventual release of everybody but murderers, and using at the time the kind of burgeoning prison system that was just starting to get ratcheted up as a place of except for in the case of murderers, a place of rehabilitation, and of course getting rid of debtors' prisons, which actually happened as well. As far as territorial expansion, that happened as well. He advocated for Texas and Oregon to come into the Union and to invite Mexico and Canada peacefully if they wanted to join. So, I mean, as far as stuff that's still, applicable today directly, it would probably be prison reform, and he would probably be considered, in our modern terms, left-leaning on that idea. But the ideas of left and right would also have been very foreign to him. Not sure if that answers your question or.
Okay, yeah, I'm good.
Who's-
Rather extraordinary to have this group this quiet.
Can I interject another quick anecdote? Were you at the MHA in Ogden this year?
Yeah, that's where we presented this paper.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I must have gone to another session. Were you at John Turner's session?
Yes.
Okay, so you heard, maybe the other folks on the call would be amused by his response. Someone asked him if he would have voted for Joseph Smith in 1844, and his reply was no, but if he'd been a candidate in the most recent presidential election, he would have seriously considered supporting Joseph Smith. So I thought that was
Funny anecdote, right?
quite an interesting comment. Well, if you don't, I mean, I have other questions. If there's somebody else on the call who'd like to jump in, I don't want to.
Nobody has their hand up. Go ahead, James.
Okay, so to jump back to the other side of the of your presentation, Kate's work on Bobby Kennedy Jr. Senior, right? Junior.
Yeah.
That's
Crucial difference.
okay. Still. I mean, it's probably interesting to people. Certainly, people younger than many of us on this call probably don't remember Bobby Kennedy Sr. But so now the name evokes a certain cabinet secretary in our day who people may have different views about than people had about his father long ago. However, I guess my question to both of you is, I mean, this is a fascinating comparison, but I guess the question is there kind of a larger theory, if you will, behind making a comparison of these two figures. Because, as a, history trivia guy, I could, and I'm sure me and other people in this call and many other people could, rattle off a huge long list of why they aren't comparable. They're different backgrounds, different eras, different issues, really kind of different outcomes, different heritages of their work, very different circumstances surrounding their assassinations. Joseph clearly was a political assassination. It's a very open question whether Robert Kennedy Sr.'s assassination really had a political element to it, as opposed to being just some crazy guy, and so forth. So I guess, we could run off tons of reasons why it's just an, coincidence that they were both assassinated, and that there really are big differences between the two. So I guess my question is do you have a theory to say why it is that you think that we can gain some insight from comparing the two the way you both have here?
Well, I can start, and then Katie can add anything she wants. Obviously, it starts with a trivia question, right? Who are the only two assassinated presidential candidates in United States history? And after having done my, most of my scholarly work on Joseph Smith's campaign, I started investigating Robert Kennedy's campaign. And you're right, there's lots of things that make them completely different. One had a chance at the White House, one didn't. One came from money, one came from poverty. What struck me was the similarities, both as, several similarities. One, religious minorities. Two, a big one is after Liberty Jail, I think most historians of Joseph Smith see a very different man for the rest of his life. With Robert Kennedy, it's the exact same pattern with the death of his brother. In fact, I'm in communication with one of his campaign staffers who's still alive, who's currently writing a book about that, about the shift in Robert Kennedy from the ruthless going after the mob and pragmatically trying to handle civil rights to the candidate in 1968, and why that big change happens. And so there's this kind of pivot moment, Liberty Jail and Jack Kennedy's assassination, that puts them on a collision course with running for president. And they have similar, their Nauvoo and Bedford-Stuyvesant as examples are just some examples of some similar kind of in the same vein, ideas. So there's a lot of that. The way that I'm the overall thing that I'm doing from it is are you familiar with Plutarch's biographies? Yeah, so that idea, yeah, for those that aren't, Plutarch was an ancient Roman historian who would take a person from Greek civilization and a person from more contemporary Roman civilization and tell their life stories, and then at the end kind of have a moral lesson about what their lives, how they compared to one another, how they were similar, how they were different, what choices they could have made differently, but also some kind of larger kind of moral lesson about the two. So his most famous one is Alexander the Great and Julius Caesar. So the idea here for me is to do a similar kind of idea, except for, Plutarch would do one whole guy and then the other whole guy. My idea here is to go back and forth between the two, and then at the end, gives somewhat of the kind of the ideas that Katie was talking about maybe some of the answers we're looking for about society today, some of the things Paul prayed for so eloquently today, that maybe some of the older ideas from those who ventured to stick their necks out might actually give us not the exact same ideas, but better ideas going forward. I'm concerned, if I'm being honest, I'm concerned about the political situation in the United States. Um, I all I cared about in the last election is that whoever won enough that there wouldn't there wouldn't be difficulties in the streets, and so looking forward to the next election. I have no idea what's going to be happening, but at the same time, one of the things that both of these candidates were striving to do, and all candidates say this, right? That they want to bring America together, that they're looking for unity. And to some degree, probably most of them think that way, but these men were actually putting into practice ideas before their campaigns that were working on trying to unite people. So that's another thing that I like about the two of them, and I think could be a lesson for today's time. I don't know if there's anything you want to add to that, Katie.
Just that the differences that they have is also really illuminating, right? To know that somebody wealthy could use their power for good, to know that somebody poor could build power, albeit in totally different ways, adds value, I feel like, to this study so that people can kind of find themselves in the story, which is important looking to the future, to elections, to the sort of state our world is in.
Thank you. Again, I'll pass the talking stick.
Okay, thanks, James. Terry, go ahead, please, Terry Walker.
Okay, thank you for your presentation and the research you've done on both those individuals. I have a very specific question you may or may not have dealt with in your research. Was the assassination of Joseph a local issue or a federal issue?
Have you read Junius and Joseph?
No.
Okay.
I'll tell you why I asked that, and if you want to talk a bit more about that.
Well, you want to tell me why you're asking?
Yes. And I can't remember if it was 2016 or 2017. Every year there's a Nauvoo history presentation in Nauvoo, and they bring in scholars from all over the place. Well, one of them was a woman who was a ballistics expert. And it was her contention that she was contracted by the federal government to assassinate Joseph Smith. And there was only one rifle in the country could have done that. And one assassin could have done that. And they hired that person to shoot from the hotel about a block or two away. And he is the one who ultimately is the one who killed Joseph. I wonder if you'd ever heard that story before.
Well, so the reason I brought up Junius and Joseph is, and I can't remember the date of this book, but it was before 2017. Their contention was that it wasn't just a local or regional Whig, meaning the Whig political party, conspiracy, but they tried to make connections all the way back to Henry Clay and a more of a national idea. And one of the things that they discovered in their research was, and his name's escaping me right now, I hope it comes to me.
Here's the book.
Yes, yep, that's the book. It's really good. I don't buy in all the way as far as they go. The fact that it was a political assassination, I mean, I don't. If you look at what people said contemporarily, both Latter-day Saints in Nauvoo and their enemies, if you ask the enemies why they did it, they'll give a political reason. If you ask the Latter-day Saints and you look in their journals in 1844, 45, 46, 47, they'll call it a political assassination. How much Joseph Smith running for president was part of that political idea. For some of them, it felt like he was out of control politically just in Eastern Illinois. And so that may have played into it. where she's probably getting that idea is there was a gentleman who shows up in Nauvoo, and his name's escaping me right now, and he pretends to want to join the church, and then turns against Joseph Smith quite drastically. And we know he was actually there at Carthage and participated in the mob, and he did have a specific rifle whose bore would probably be the best match for the chest wound, which was the fatal wound to Joseph Smith. And so the idea of someone who's showing up and being a part of that seems to be backed up by evidence. I've never heard the idea of him firing from the Hamilton Hotel, which was the only hotel there. The direction doesn't line up as far as somebody from that hotel and the window. So I'm not sure where she got that idea from, but it's in Junius and Joseph where the idea about, gosh, and I wish I could remember his name. It's just not coming to me. Anyway, who does kind of mysteriously show up and start doing stuff, and he does come from, he is a federal guy, and what he's doing there, who knows? So I mean that's a good feed the conspiracy idea that a guy from out of town comes in and and seems to play a part in this whole thing, but he's not the instigator of it. He's just part of the mob that storms the jail and is involved in it. In Junius and Joseph, they are of the authors of that are in sympathy with many other Latter-day Saint and non-Latter-day Saint or non-restorationist historians who believe that Joseph was still alive after he fell out of the window, and that 4 men basically summarily executed him. So they're looking at the wounds from that point of view. And again, the only one who had the bore kind of weapon, according to their research, was this gentleman from out of town, and I just can't remember his name for the love. Let me see if I can remember it.
What's the publication date of Junius and Joseph?
I think it's 2008. Look
2000,
at that there, Paul.
2005.
2005. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, it's a good read. And as far as like finding sources about all of this, they were exhaustive. It's pretty incredible. I'm just not buying it goes all the way back to Henry Clay. That's where they're kind of trying to lead the whole thing to.
Okay. Paul, did you have a question?
Yes, I wanted to pursue my own inclinations here because I admired both of these men. I admire their campaigns, and I regret that I don't think we've had any comparably investing presidents that have invested themselves in trying to help the poor, to help the marginalized. And I thought possibly you would care to address that for me. Tell me that we've had some people that have picked up on their themes and have used them more than what I've realized.
Are you asking me?
Both of you.
Okay, well, here's my thought. There's a great book about the 1968 election that's called the 1968, the year that broke American politics.
Uh-huh.
And it makes a pretty persuasive argument. I mean, everybody, of course, understands the political realignment that happens in 1968 into 1972, the Southern strategy by the Republicans, the switch of the South to Republican and likewise. But there's also kind of the death of kind of the old politics. And so my idea would be that while those themes have continued to be brought up, I don't know someone, at least if we look at Robert Kennedy, in interviewing people that were with him on the campaign in the last year, that I had the chance to do this, the one thing that they mention over and over again is the authenticity and sincerity of when he is in Black neighborhoods, when he's on American Indian reservations, when he is in the Appalachians. And these are voting groups that can't have in 1968 a big influence on the election. And yet he is spending time with them, vocalizing their ideas. He goes in and sits in with Cesar Chavez at his hunger strike in California and publicizes that. These are people that, for the most part, can't even vote. And so there's no advantage to him politically in um, in spending as much time and advocating as much for these marginalized communities, and at the same time arguing against a war that is becoming unpopular, but also, for example, when he was in Utah during the campaign, he actually spoke at Brigham Young University. And on the campus, he put up he was talking about the war in Vietnam, and he put up several options about what the president of the United States should do. Everything from commit thousands of more troops to commit smaller amount of troops to do nothing different. And he had them applaud for each one so they could do like a vote of which one it was. And the thing that they voted for was an increase of troops. And his response to that was, "So when are you guys signing up?" And this is something he would do on colleges' campuses in 1968 because exemptions for college still existed. The draft hadn't been instituted yet. And so, I mean, he's basically going into people and saying, like, you need to change your mind about either the war or about being involved in it. And so my point is there was an authenticity to him, it seems, that I mean, I'll let Katie talk about the funeral procession because that's another way of looking at his impact, meaning Robert Kennedy's impact. But I just don't see. I'm a poli sci guy. Election night's my Super Bowl. My wife and I are both poli sci people, and I don't see a candidate. I've obviously there's lots of candidates that have talked about the marginalized. Have even to some degree had some kind of programs, but the level of investment and authenticity into groups that can't politically support him as much as others, I haven't seen one since Robert Kennedy. And Katie, I'll let you talk about the funeral.
Yeah, Robert Kennedy's funeral was a time that really showed the sort of unity that he had and the sort of thing that we're lacking now. Because I can think of people who within their own party or tribe are seen as these sort of Robert Kennedys, but not somebody that across the aisle is respected. But like I think it was estimated that 1 million people lined up from New York, from like somewhere central New York to DC for the funeral procession. So Bobby was in the last of like 21 train cars, and they just slowly made their way through down to DC. And about 1 million people came out to wave goodbye to Bobby, to see the last train car that had his body. And pictures from this procession and accounts show people from all walks of life. This is anecdotal, of course, it's not, like a study done, but there are Black people, white people, nuns, people in factories, mothers, wealthy people, not wealthy people, watching, saying goodbye, praying, waving goodbye, singing, all sorts of different ways to mourn. And then within the car as well, there was just a crazy collection of people that the Kennedys knew that were connected with them, not just within their own party, not just within their own circle, but just a really broad circle that Kennedy had. established. And that's the sort of thing that I haven't seen today. Within circles, within these sort of ideologies, yeah, people become really famous, become really big. They have projects that they work on, but it seems very much still within this circle, and we haven't seen that sort of bipartisan outreach.
I thank you both for those responses. My own contemplation on it suggests that Jimmy Carter's post-presidency as an advocate for voting in other countries is one of the best representations of trying to help the people have the governance of their own voice. And
I would agree.
and then for a social organizer in Chicago to get to be elected as an African American is also rather significant. But I agree that in terms of performance, we've not had anybody that's stepped in to take the place of these two men. And I think that our overall politics has suffered because of it. I think we've been far more divisive, militaristic, and much less compassionate because we have bothered to elect people that did not carry the kind of traditions that these two men carried. And so I appreciate you giving emphasis to it because I think we need to be more politically sensitive to the character of our leaders and try to give those people with character a chance to rule, a chance to lead, a chance to
Yeah.
influence.
So Derek, someone had put in the chat a couple of different names for the possible shooter for the hotel. Was Colonel Levi Williams or William
No, it's
Grover?
not Williams. It's not Grover. It's those guys are locals. I wish I had my copy of Genius and Joseph here, but I'm trying to do a
David, did
quick
you want to
search.
add something? There you are.
Yeah, it was me that put those names up there. I did this search and they popped up. I was just trying to help you out in case those were the
Oh
names that you were trying to
Ring a
think of.
bell.
no,
But I thought the same thing. I went, yeah, those guys were local. They weren't from out of the area.
yeah, and he's actually. I mean, he shows up in the Joseph Smith story because he's hanging around Nauvoo, and like I mentioned, he's even trying to join the church, and then he quickly turns against uh, Joseph. Gosh, why can I not think of his name?
You'll think of it when we get off Zoom.
Exactly.
Exactly.
Isn't that the law of averages? That's exactly what I'll do.
I need to buy the book and look it up.
Yeah, you can buy the book and look it up. And I mean, they really do a good job on the primary source material. They scoured all kinds of stuff. There's actually people
But
who confess on their deathbed that they found in newspapers. They confess in their deathbeds and in the late 1800s of being there at Carthage and participating in that has helped us name other people that were there that we haven't known before. So it's really good and exhaustive, not exhaustive, but near exhaustive research on the whole assassination.
John C. Bennett?
No.
No.
Ladies
Gosh.
and gentlemen, let me call your attention that David Denning is also one of these people who has an inheritance here. I had the privilege of giving him a tour at the Joseph Smith III home in Nauvoo a week ago Friday, and it was rather striking because I lined him up beside the portrait of Joseph Smith Jr. and beside the daguerreotype, where you can see the crease in Joseph Smith's forehead, where I've been calling it a scar. But if you notice, Mr. Denning has the same crease. He is the great grandson of Alexander Smith. And so that wound is actually a genetic one. So here you're dealing with the descendant of Joseph Smith, about whom we've been talking tonight. And so to have Jim Lucas finding his ancestors referenced and David Denning as well, it's gratifying how this little group pulls together such fascinating coincidences. Thank you, David, for joining us. Oh, and by the way, he's going to be speaking, I believe the date is November 9th on our forum with Alexander's perspective on the Book of Mormon.
Yep. With my mother will most likely be joining us. My mother's Gracia Jones. But it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you again for inviting me.
Well, you can understand why this is such a fascinating forum when you have coincidences like these two show up in one evening. It's just sort of neat how people can find their commonalities in places where they are least expected.
Can I ask another quick question?
Sure.
So Kate and we and your first name
Derek.
isn't showing up. Derek?
Derek. Yeah,
Derek.
Derek.
Kate and Derek. Okay. Now, again, being a history trivia guy, as soon as you were presenting, the other thing that popped in my head was that there is a possible third contender for your list, which is that there was a prominent presidential candidate who was almost assassinated, who also had a very interesting politics, and that was Teddy Roosevelt. Have you ever, are you kind of mentioning that at all, or looking at that at all? It's because if he had died, he, you might have had a trio there of fascinating political characters with very, unusual for their time political.
Yeah.
Well, it would have been a
platforms.
quartet with President Trump too. So it was too many people to fit in.
Right.
Almost had to change the paper. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, some people have tried to say that, the assassination of Huey Long in the 30s, but he was not a declared candidate yet. He was just, there was just speculation that he might run. So, yeah, as far as actual, and then, also in 72, you have the attempted assassination of the segregationist. His name just left my
George
head.
Wallace.
George Wallace, yeah. That doesn't kill him, but cripples him. And so there's been lots of attempts, but only two, and hopefully it stays that way, successful assassinations. I found the name of the guy. The guy is John C. Elliott. So, and if you look in the book, he has connections to the Whig Party. He's a federal marshal, and he just shows up right around the time of the assassination in the months ahead of it. And so it's just kind of weird. But again, it could just be causal as well. I mean, we don't, or casual, not causal. But who knows? But I've never heard the shot from the hotel. That would have been quite a shot with the technology of the day, to shoot that distance, and the line of sight doesn't work either.
Well, if you stand in the window where Joseph went out, you can see several buildings across the square there that I don't know the date of those buildings. If they were up then, there are possibilities. It's a long way. It takes a shot.
I thought you mentioned that it was the hotel. If it was the
No.
hotel,
I don't know if
okay.
it was the hotel.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, there's been some, you'd have to be pretty far back. And obviously, like you said, you'd have to be up to be able to make that shot. The guys that are shooting from outside, we have an artist's rendition of what the room looked like a decade later, and there were still musket ball holes all along the door wall from outside that were way too high to hit anybody. So you'd have to be up in a tree or in a building to get the right angle to do that. But I don't know of any primary source, and I've looked at a lot of it, that has anybody doing anything like that. Whereas there are lots of primary source material of men standing over Joseph and shooting him after he's on the ground, whether he's dead or not. And like I mentioned in this book, they make the argument that the only one with a gun like that had the bore that could create the size of the wound in Joseph's chest was this John C. Elliott.
I think
Looks like
Go
Joe's
ahead.
got his hand up. Go ahead, Joe.
I'm curious as to what the rifle is.
Oh, I bet you are.
If it's only 100 meters, I could do it with a rifle from that era. That era, it was almost all percussion by 1840. You saw very few flintlocks. I could do it with a flintlock. I've got 3 flintlocks in my back room here that could do it.
That have board.
Yeah, I've got 258s. I have a 62 flintlock. It
Okay,
would make a hole in your chest that you could stick your head in and see what damage had been done.
So I'm actually looking in Junius and Joseph on a PDF version I have, where that's where I found him, and I'm trying to see any reference to the gun, because they do reference the kind of gun that he had. I'm not sure.
I have a basic problem with people saying that he's the only man that could make a shot, and that's the only gun.
Well, again, I don't remember for all the specifics of the argument. I know that is the argument in the book. I'm looking for where it mentions the kind of gun, because they even have provenance for the gun being handed down when he ends up when he returns to Ohio.
Yeah, the person that she mentioned, she didn't mention it by name. He was a military sniper. And I don't know what kind of guns military snipers would have used, but she judges that by the bullets that would have been used.
Yeah, I'm not finding, I'd have to read the whole thing, but it does mention in there the type of gun that he has, as opposed to the guns that the militia had. And most of the members of the mob are discharged militiamen from the Warsaw Company of the militia, who all had the same kind of arms, the same ones that the Nauvoo Legion had. But he had this other long bore rifle that I can't find it. But
Page 260
but
long.
but
Yeah, page 260 says prior to his departure from Ohio, Elliott was provided with a large bore long rifle made by a local Butler County gunsmith. And the rifle that farther down, next paragraph, the rifle that he carried was the largest bore in the attacking party. And so it was found that John C. Elliott had fired the fatal shot.
right. Yeah, I'm on that page too. I somewhere I remember them saying the actual, maybe they didn't, the actual physical type or actual name of that actual rifle, but maybe they didn't. I'm just misremembering that. But whoever it was that was asking that, if you just Google Junius and Joseph, you can download the PDF version from Utah State University. It has the whole book, and that's true for any of you, obviously. But yeah, you can go through that chapter a little more carefully and see if it's in there.
Thank you, Joe. Anybody else?
If not, then it's time to sing. We're approaching 20 till 10. I am choosing to sing tonight come and bring light, and it's not something that is particularly familiar, but I think the words have a profound message for our topic this evening. Come and bring light to a people in darkness. Come set us free from the chains we have made. We are your people, the flock that you tend. Lord, open our eyes once again. To the ones broken-hearted, open our eyes. To the plight of the poor, open our eyes. To the innocent children, open our eyes. Teach us compassion and love. To the victims of violence, to the ones who seek justice, open our eyes. To those sitting in prison, open our eyes. Teach us compassion and love. When a color divides us, opens our eyes. When the darkness surrounds us, open our eyes. When we choose to look elsewhere, open our eyes. Teach us compassion and love. Come and bring light to a people in darkness. Come set us free from the chains we have made. We are your people, the flock that you tend. Lord, open our eyes once again. Good night, friends. May God bless you.
Good night,
Night,
and thank you.
everybody. Thank you.
Night.
Good night. Thank you.